Hi, my name's Jack. I'm a product designer and video maker from the UK, and for the past month I've been living in Toronto, Canada as a digital nomad. I've been working fully remotely from here as a product designer whilst also spending a lot of time exploring the city and getting used to life in Toronto. Today we're going to be talking about what it's like being a digital nomad in Toronto. So to start, let's talk about accommodation. I've been staying in an Airbnb in the west of Toronto in an area called Runnymede. It's a very peaceful neighbourhood. I felt very safe here. Within 15 minutes walk, there's plenty of shops, restaurants, pubs, and also a metro station, which is super useful for getting into downtown Toronto, where a lot of the things that happen in this city occur. I am just staying in a room within a shared Airbnb. I was very lucky that when I first arrived at my Airbnb, the two people who were staying in it when I arrived were both extremely nice, and we very quickly became friends, went out for drinks and food, and spent a lot of time together. In terms of the Airbnb itself, I also feel very lucky with what I managed to get. It's got a queen-size bed, lots of space within my room. There's a desk for me to work at, there's decent Wi-Fi, a kitchen, and also a washing machine and dryer, neither of which are in every Airbnb, so very happy to have that. One downside of this place is that the apartment is actually in the basement of a house, meaning that it is a little gloomy. Additionally, it's also quite cold. The air conditioning unit down here is shared with the house upstairs, and I think it must be a lot hotter up there, and also the controls are up there. So when they're trying to cool the house down up there, it can get quite cold down here. As you can see, I'm in a jumper. Yeah, outside it's probably about 27 degrees, which isn't ideal. Despite that though, this has been a great first place to stay, and I definitely recommend somewhere like this if you are planning on staying in Toronto, and also Runnymede as a great area to look into. So things that I've done while in Toronto, obviously a big reason to be a digital nomad is to be traveling and exploring and seeing new places. So I have done a lot of the kind of traditional touristy things in Toronto or nearby places. One of these things is I visited Niagara Falls with the two people that I mentioned earlier who were staying in the Airbnb with me. This was such a fun day out. Definitely the highlight of it was going in the ferry that actually went right at the bottom of the falls. As you can see from the GoPro footage that I got, this was super intense. We got absolutely soaked, but it was so much fun. And Niagara in general was just a cool place to visit for the day. Additionally, I've been to Center Island a couple of times, which is really nice. There's a little theme park on there and nice beaches, and just generally it's a nice place to walk around. Also, there's a really cool view looking back at the skyline of Toronto, which I took a lot of photos of, as you can imagine. Earlier this week, I also went up the CN Tower. I actually was filming a day in the life video that day, so you'll be seeing that probably in a few days or a week's time, so I won't talk too much about that. And then I also went to a Blue Jays game, which is baseball. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of baseball. I don't think I'd ever even watched baseball on TV before coming here. However, going to the stadium, the atmosphere, it was a really fun evening out, and yeah, something I'd definitely recommend. And then outside of the touristy stuff, also done plenty of eating and drinking and exploring around the city, just walking around, taking photos, meeting people, having lots of fun. So in my spare time, Toronto has been a lot of fun, that's for sure. So obviously, in addition to exploring and having fun, I have also had to work while I've been here. Both due to COVID and also being a product designer, I am very comfortable with remote working. So remote working from here has been no issue at all for me, as I've done it pretty consistently for well over 2 years now. As I mentioned earlier, I am still working for a UK-based company. They did offer to change my hours so I wouldn't be waking up so early. However, I decided that at least at first I'd like to continue working UK time, which might sound crazy to some people, and it has definitely been an interesting experience. If you can do the maths yourself, that does mean that I am starting work at 4 AM and finishing at midday. And I do plan to do a specific video about my experience of waking up that early, but just to give you a preview of my thoughts is, obviously starting work that early isn't as relaxing as starting later in the day. However, it does make it feel like I have a lot more free time. Finishing at midday and then having the whole afternoon and evening to do whatever I want has meant that I've got out and about in Toronto doing things way more than I think I would have otherwise if I was still finishing work at 5 p.m. I obviously have to be pretty conscious of when I go to bed and kind of balance out later nights with earlier nights to make sure I get enough sleep, but that's not too different to if I was working a normal work schedule. And as I said, I will be talking about this in more detail in a future video. Other things about Toronto, the transport I've actually been pretty impressed by. I found it super easy to kind of learn how it worked. Basically with the subway, there's two main lines. There are like two additional ones, but I haven't taken those. So there's two lines, one goes horizontally across the city and one goes vertically but in kind of a U shape. These get you access to a lot of the city, especially downtown. And then for locations that aren't close to subway stations, there's a ton of streetcars and buses that can get you to pretty much anywhere else. Another thing that I've liked about the transport is the pricing. You basically pay $3 CAD 20 and for 2 hours you get unlimited changes and unlimited travel. Meaning that if you are just going to a place and you're going to come back within 2 hours, that trip has only cost you that $3.20. This in my opinion is a lot better than London, where I'm from, as if you're getting the tube, it depends kind of how far you're going. Also if you get a bus and then you get on the underground, those cost two separate fees. So I think this system is a lot easier. I've also got quite a few Ubers, mainly at the end of nights out when either the subway isn't running anymore or I'm just too lazy or had too many drinks to get home. And Ubers come very quickly and the fee is pretty similar to what I'd pay in London. And I've also taken advantage of the share bikes, which if you're from London, then they're very similar to the Boris bikes, which basically are publicly available bikes that you pay a small fee to rent them for about half an hour, and I found that a really fun way to get around the city. The culture in Toronto I have found very similar to pretty much every other Western metropolis that I've visited, meaning that I have found it very similar to London. There's a lot of diversity here in the people, it's extremely multicultural, which being such a big fan of London means that that's been something I've enjoyed a lot here. I would say the biggest difference in culture that I've noticed here is probably just how nice people are. I know it's like a stereotype of Canadians, especially like hospitality staff, but everyone who I've met who's from here has been so nice to me. And especially when meeting strangers, it's noticeably nicer than most other places I've been to before. And finally, let's talk about the costs here. I am going to do a full video about how much I spent in Toronto, which will basically be going through everything that I've spent in a month staying here, so accommodation, transport, food, drinks, gym membership, that kind of thing. But I feel like it's still worth mentioning some of that in this video. So coming from the UK to Canada, the currency conversion of the pound to the Canadian dollar is very good. At the time of recording, $1 Canadian is roughly 65 pence. However, despite that, Toronto by no means is a cheap place. Probably because I've been going out and about and doing so much, I've easily spent the same amount as I would in a month in London, if not maybe a bit more. I think that is to be expected though, because I am doing a lot of these touristy things and also just wanting to be out all the time and doing things. One thing that I really don't like about the pricing here is a lot of places here don't include the tax in the price they give for an item, meaning that things often cost a bit more than you expect. This is something I'm not used to. Maybe people from other parts of the world think this is completely normal. Another thing is that in hospitality, a tip is expected, usually of kind of 15 to 20%. So if you see a price on a menu, you kind of have to consider there's also being the tax added on, plus you're also probably going to be spending another 20% on the tip. I think probably for a lot of people this is normal, but just coming from the UK, that's something I've found pretty strange and definitely had to get used to. But overall, I've had such an incredible time in Toronto. I really do love this city. I could definitely see it as a place that I could live one day. I would say that living here has not pushed me outside of my comfort zone in any way at all. I guess you could see that both as a good thing or a bad thing. In terms of being a good thing, it is my first stop on my travels, so not going too crazy with the first location is absolutely fine. It's meant that adjusting to other lifestyle changes with this kind of new way of life are made a bit easier because everything else around it doesn't feel too different. However, on the negative side, obviously a big part of why I'm traveling is to have new experiences and kind of discover new cultures and places that feel very different to what I've experienced before, which definitely doesn't apply to Toronto. It almost feels like I'm still in London. But I definitely do want to return here one day and also do a much bigger trip where I go across Canada, see the different cities, go into the more rural areas, because Toronto is very much just the tip of the iceberg of Canada. I know there is so much more to see. So that pretty much wraps up this video. If you've enjoyed it, please do click the thumbs up button. I've got lots more videos to come. A lot of them will be on Toronto and also about my next stop, which is going to be New York City, which I'm extremely excited about. It's currently the 25th of August when I'm recording this. I'll be heading to New York on the 2nd of September, so not long to go now. So if you want to see the videos about there, make sure you do subscribe and keep up to date with all my movements on social media at jackjenkinsyt. That's everything from me, so I'll see you on the next one.